welcome to another episode of Damanda Homestead. My name is Amanda, and today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing an early summer kind of homestead tour, just so you guys can kind of see what's going on here kind of early on in the summertime. All right, it is the beginning of July here in Ontario in Canada, and we had initially a very wet and cold spring. So things are about 2 weeks delayed, I'm gonna say. But anyway, let's go and have a look and see what's going on here on the homestead. Okay, so this is the front of our house. And we have about 1.5 acres of property, and there you can see is our road. Okay, so we don't have too much out here in the front, but what we do have is our beehive. And those bees are doing just great. As you can see, very, very active hive. And out here in the front of the house, we have a lot of our perennial flowers that I always try and kind of maintain so that the bees have got a source of nectar, at least here. And we'd also have some medicinal herbs. We've got echinacea, we've got yarrow, we've got mullein, we've got valerian, we've got mint, we've got lemon balm, and lots of, we've got some marshmallow back in the backyard, and then obviously a few herbs, culinary herbs as well. So now we're walking along the side here, and I've got a whole bunch of hostas here in the shade, and then some daylilies as well. And if you guys don't know, both hostas and daylilies are edible. The hostas in particular, the first shoots in the spring, are kind of a very nice alternative to asparagus. Really, really tasty actually. So if you've got a shaded area, you can definitely grow hostas and they'll feed you. And then over here also in our shaded area is wild ginger that we are going to start being able to harvest in hopefully a couple of years, the little root rhizomes from that to kind of make some teas and flavored drinks and things. And on the other side, I have just recently started some strawberries. Just to kind of be some sacrificial strawberries that hopefully will keep the critters away from the strawberries in my proper garden. All right, and now we're coming into the backyard, which is where the bulk of everything is. There's my big long vegetable garden. There's my orchard over there, and way in the back is my chicken coop. All right, so let's take a look and see what we have got going on back here. Okay, to begin with, over in this corner, I've got some Jerusalem artichoke or sunchoke, which is kind of like a tuber, like almost like a potato, but less starchy. And it's a perennial, meaning that it will keep coming back year after year. You have to be a little bit careful because these can be invasive. They can spread a lot. So wherever you want to put these, you got to make sure that they're kind of blocked in so that they won't go where you don't want them to. And then I've got a few more sacrificial strawberries down here. And then I've got a little bit more of an herb garden. These are more culinary herbs over in this corner here, right beside my root cellar entrance. And then we've got the big giant vegetable garden. All right, so we're gonna walk along and see what we have in here. Okay, in the front we've got strawberries. They're just about done. I've taken the netting off these just so the birds can come in and have the last few ones. I've got some asparagus in the back, which is also finished and is kind of, we're just letting that grow now so that way it can replenish its energy for next year. And we'll move along. I've also put in some really big trellises this year to try and kind of get some more vertical space in this garden. And you can kind of see I've got 3 archways and then 2 of these just kind of straight verticals. So these are a climbing bean. They're a drying bean for like soups and stews and things. This is called a borlotti bean. And then over here, I've got my little rain gauge, obviously. And then I've got some more climbing beans. So this is kind of a tunnel, a bean tunnel. And we've got the climbing beans are in behind. And then I've got a row of bush beans on the inside here. And all of our rows are 30 inches wide with about 18 inches of pathway space. And so that way all the rows are staying in place and they don't move, so that I'm always walking on the pathways and I'm never compacting the soil, which is important, right? So this is kind of the benefit of a raised bed without the kind of fuss of a raised bed, because the pathways are a little bit easier. All right, and as I said, so the bush beans will start producing first. You can see they're already flowering, right? So they'll start producing beans earlier, and then by the time these are done, the climbing bean should hopefully be producing as well. They've got a few little flowers on them. So that's kind of how you layer things, so that while one thing is producing, then another thing is growing. So hopefully you've always got production going on in your garden and something to eat. Over here, I've got my squash and my cucumbers, and they hopefully will get up and over this trellis. As I said, everything's a little bit behind here. Normally I would expect these squash plants to be bigger than they are right now. Well, I've got zucchini at the back there. And you can also see that I've got kind of straw mulch in the pathways, and then I've got pine shavings in the actual kind of rows themselves. And that's to keep down the weeds. Makes the weeding a lot easier for me, and that's super important when you've got a big garden. I like the straw in the pathways because it's cheaper, but straw can actually attract slugs. So I don't like to put that right against my plants, and that's why I did the pine shavings instead. All right, we got another row of climbing beans, because beans are really productive around here. They feed us really well, so I kind of emphasize those. They're also really good nitrogen fixers, meaning that they enrich the soil. So they're a good part of your crop rotation. I have got a tunnel of tomato plants, and these are being trained up this trellis. So on this side, I have got my cherry tomatoes and my cluster and beefsteak tomatoes. And then you can see I've kind of secondarily planted this with lettuce, which again is another kind of layering thing. And on this side, I've got my Roma tomatoes, and they're starting to kind of produce as well. And I've kind of got more lettuce planted, and I also planted a row of beets in here. They didn't germinate too well, so I'm going to probably plant some more, another crop of lettuce. Having multiple crops of lettuce is a great idea, because that way you always have some, right? Because it will eventually want to go to seed. And I've got a row of eggplant, and then different peppers at the back. And because we haven't had too much sun and too much hot temperatures, they haven't done as well, right? So that's why it's always a good idea to kind of pick things that are cool season crops and warm season crops. And that way, if you have whatever kind of season, regardless, you're going to get food production. Over here, I've got my Brussels sprouts. My chickens are very talkative. I've got my Brussels sprouts and some celery at the back, and that's doing well. I've got my cabbage underneath the row covers, and you can see why, because there's a cabbage moth right there. As soon as I take that cover off, they go after them. So they don't seem to care as much about the kale and the Brussels sprouts, but the cabbage, they will just go and really they'll lay their eggs and then skeletonize it. So I always keep my cabbage covered. Over here, speaking of kale, is a really long row of kale. Kale is another thing that really feeds us. Very, very versatile vegetable. I probably will actually do a whole video segment on kale, because people always wonder what to do with it, and we use it for lots of different stuff. And here is a row of spring vegetables that is pretty much done. And then we kind of get into our winter root vegetables. I've got my garlic here where we've harvested the scapes already. We've got our storage onions in behind. And there's not as much to see here because everything's still just starting to come up. We've got beets at the very back there. We've got a row or several rows of carrots, and then turnips as well, and some parsnips in the front here. So lots of good stuff. And you can see, here are my little chickens. I'll go and say hi because they're so loud. Hello, girls. Normally these ladies would be outside free ranging, but right now I've got some berries that are ripening, and I don't want them to eat them. So they get to be inside for now, much as they're not happy with me about it. And you can see they've got a whole bunch of weeds in there. Every time I'm weeding, I'll just kind of throw those weeds in there for them. And then they'll scratch around in it and they'll actually compost all this stuff. And then I'll pull out that compost and put it on my garden beds and around my fruit trees. And it's a wonderful kind of basically free, quote unquote, compost. So I don't ever have to buy that stuff. All right, now we're down at the end here. And I've got my so-called orchard and berry bushes. Along here, I've got gooseberry bushes. And then we've got a whole bunch of haskap plants. If you are haskap bushes, if you have never heard of a haskap, it's kind of like a weird shaped blueberry. It's more tart, but it's really nice tasting. And around here, or if you've ever tried to grow blueberries and they just don't grow because your soil isn't acidic enough, haskaps might be a good option. And they've just finished. They'll kind of produce fruit around the same time as the strawberries. They were covered with netting, but I have uncovered them now because they're done. And you can see they are also protected by electric fencing because we're right by the forest here. Oh, and there's a bait hive. Right by the forest here. So we got lots of critters, raccoons and squirrels and chipmunks and lots of stuff that would love to eat all my fruit. You can see that all my fruit trees, where they are producing fruit, are bagged. They're dressed up for the ball, as I like to say. And so what you can kind of take a look at here, we look, and here's a little apple, all right? So I've also got some videos on what different apple sprays I use at different time of the year, but kind of towards the end of the summer, I don't use as many sprays to keep the bugs off. So normally the trees are pretty healthy by then, and then I just cover the fruit like this. Over here, covered in netting, is a cherry plum cross. You can kind of see the netting on it. Okay. Can't really see, but there are kind of cherry plums or chums as they call them starting to form, and obviously since these are small, they're more numerous. I can't cover them with bags, so we opt for netting instead. All right, and again down at the back of the yard here against the fence, I have just transplanted some wild blue raspberries. We have tried to put raspberries in here, but they tend to get overgrown, like the domestic raspberries. But we do have wild raspberries that grow all over the place. They kind of form a bramble. They're a little bit taller and they're pretty viney. So they grow up and over the weeds. So I figured, why fight nature? The wild kind of purple raspberries are what grow. Then that's what I'm going to plant. And then hopefully in a year or two, this whole fence should be covered with wild purple raspberries. And that will be a great addition. And because of the thorns, the birds don't tend to go after them as much around here. And so I'm hoping that we shouldn't really have to protect them too much. Okay, and then the not so pretty part of the yard. This is where we do our chopping and splitting of wood because we have a couple of wood stoves inside our house that we try and use to supplement our heat pump to keep the house warm in the winter time. And so in here, oh, there's a bit of cardboard in the way, but this is our start of our wood splitting here. This is not enough by any stretch of the imagination, but this is what we've got going right now. And this wood shed will be completely full by the time, and then hopefully kind of a few of these as we go along by the time the winter comes. And now we're kind of getting to the right against the back of the house here, and you can kind of see we've got this big giant elderberry bush. This is only 3 plants, which has just decided it loves this place. And elderberries are another kind of one of those really, really versatile fruits that we love. The birds also don't go after them. Elderberries, you can use them for desserts like pies and crisps and things. You can make them into jam. You can make them into elderberry syrup, which has got a lot of health benefits. And then you can also ferment them into elderberry wine, which we do as well. And right now there's tons of blossoms, and that's really great food for our bees. You can even kind of make elder flower wine as well if you're interested in that. And that is another kind of great use for those. So then, as we're right behind the house here, we've got more hostas, right? So you can kind of fit in your food wherever you can layer things, right? Some things will grow well in partial shade. Some things need sun. Hostas are a great thing to kind of fit in wherever you've got some shade. We've got some wild roses back there for the rose hips. We've got some mallow back there for kind of medicinal properties, and we've got some rhubarb. And then we have our grapevines, okay? We've got 3 different kinds of grapes. We've got a white seeded grape that we use mostly for wine. We've got a Concord grape for fresh eating. And then we've got a seedless red grape that is for fresh eating as well as for raisins. Those ones we've just planted. They're kind of small. And then in the back here, kind of growing up against the lattice, are hops. And these are tea maker hops. They're not beer hops. So this is actually another medicinal plant, which is great if you're trying to make like a relaxing tea, to try and help you sleep and that kind of thing. All right. When they start producing cones, as hops do, I'll show you how to harvest them and what to do with them. So thank you for joining me on this early summer tour of our homestead. Things are growing well. As I said, everything's a couple weeks behind, but it's still pretty good. We are eating exclusively vegetables from our garden at this point, kind of along with some things that we still have from leftover from last year in our freezer and canned. But basically, things are going to start getting into full production in not very long at all, and then we're going to have lots and lots of produce. All right, everybody? So this just kind of shows you how we've got, only about an acre and much less than that under actual kind of cultivation, how you can grow pretty much all the vegetables that you need in the year and potentially almost all the fruit that you need in not much space. All right, everybody, if you like this video, please feel free to press the subscribe button and then the notification bell so that way you never miss another one of my videos. All right, everybody, have a great day, and we'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.